Denmark Street, London. June 24th, 2014. The narrow lane looked the same as it had in 1965. Same brick, same low light, same smell of old wood and rosin seeping through every doorframe on the block. If you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't find it. Reed's Fine Instruments sat at the far end of the street, past the music publishers and the two competing acoustic shops. Malcolm Reed had been behind the counter for 28 years. He knew the street the way a doctor knows his own pulse. Not by thinking about it, just by being there long enough. That afternoon, he was cleaning a 1960 Fender Stratocaster. Sunburst finish, original hardware. It sat in the glass case by the door like a small flame, visible from the street, drawing people in who would never buy it but like to look. The price tag read £45,000. Malcolm set it carefully back in the case and looked up when the door opened. The man who walked in wore a plain gray jacket over a dark shirt, a flat cap pulled low. No watch Malcolm could see. He moved through the doorway without ceremony, without looking at Malcolm, the way people enter rooms they've been in 1,000 times before. Malcolm watched him. The man moved slowly along the left wall. He stopped at a '72 Telecaster, leaned close to examine the headstock, then moved on without touching it. At a Les Paul Jr., he paused longer, tilted his head slightly. His hands stayed in his pockets. Malcolm had been reading people for 28 years. Shoes first, always shoes. These were clean but old, well kept but unremarkable. He read him this way: retired. Saw the Strat in the window, wandered in. Malcolm came around the counter. Looking for something specific? The man turned. His eyes were calm, dark, unhurried. Just having a look, he said. His voice was quiet. London in it, somewhere underneath. Malcolm nodded and walked to the glass case. He lifted the Stratocaster out and placed it on the counter under the light. Worth your time. 60 Strat, original PAF pickups, never rewound. One owner until '89, then private collection. Never toured. He rested one hand flat on the body. 45,000. Same model sold in Edinburgh last spring for 52. The man looked at the guitar. Not at the price, at the wood, the grain under the burst, the way the pickup covers had aged to cream. Can I hold it? Malcolm's hand didn't move. For instruments at this price point, I usually need a client reference, something showing financial standing. It's not personal, it's insurance. The man looked at him for a moment. I understand, he said. No edge in it. No offense taken. He simply turned from the counter. The back corridor was where Malcolm kept what he didn't want to think about. Consignments that hadn't moved. Trade-ins accepted just to close other deals. A folding clearance sign leaned against the wall. The man stopped at the lowest shelf. Half hidden behind a cardboard box was a Telecaster. The finish had once been pale butterscotch, but decades had turned it the color of old newspaper. The strings were rusted. Someone had wrapped masking tape around one of the tuning pegs. A handwritten price tag read £180. The man crouched down and picked it up. Malcolm called from across the shop. That's just a consignment. Deadline on the contract is today. If it doesn't move by 6, it goes in a bulk lot. Repair costs would outrun the value. There's an Epiphone on the far wall if you want something playable. The man wasn't listening. He turned the guitar over, checked the neck joint with his thumb, ran a fingertip along the fret ends on the treble side, slowly from first position all the way to the heel. His thumbnail caught each fret individually. He tilted the neck toward the light and looked down the board. Malcolm crossed his arms. Then the door opened again. The man who came in was somewhere in his mid-70s, a corduroy jacket with the collar turned up, hands in his pockets. He'd been standing on the pavement outside. Malcolm hadn't noticed him, but thinking back later, he'd realized the man had been watching through the window for some time. Malcolm recognized him. Ray Finch, the consignment guitar's owner. Mr. Finch, still an hour before 6, but there's been no interest. Ray didn't answer. His eyes had found the guitar in the stranger's hands. Something moved across his face. Not quite alarm. Something older than alarm. Just came to have a look, Ray said. One last time. The man in the flat cap looked up from the guitar and looked at Ray. Is this yours? It is. A pause. I set it up myself, filed the frets, reset the neck angle, shimmed the bridge. That would have been 66, maybe 67. Ray pulled his hands from his pockets. The knuckles were enlarged. Decades of fine work, small tools, cold workshop mornings. I used to prepare guitars for the studios. Edvision, IBC, Olympic, most of the London rooms. He said it without pride, just a fact. When the health insurance stopped, I couldn't keep the workshop rent. Bank turned down the refinancing. His voice stayed flat. This guitar was one of the last things I had left to move. Malcolm didn't respond. The stranger turned the guitar over and looked at the neck pocket. His fingers found something. He brought the guitar closer to the light. Carved into the wood, too small to notice unless you were looking, was a compass rose. Simple, precise, no larger than a thumbnail. You put this here? Ray nodded slowly. I put one in every guitar I worked on. My foreman told me once that a good instrument should take you somewhere. He looked at the carving. I never found a better way of saying it. The stranger looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Malcolm. Got an amp? Something small. Malcolm blinked. The strings on that guitar are rusted. It won't hold tune. Got an amp? There was a Fender Princeton in the back room. Malcolm brought it out without fully knowing why. Set it on a chair near the wall. The stranger plugged in a cable, turned the volume low and waited for the tubes to warm up. That hum, old and warm and full of patience. He sat down, settled the Telecaster in his lap, pushed the cap back slightly, tested the tuning quietly, adjusting two pegs by small degrees, tilting his head to hear the decay on each note. His right hand rested against the body. No pick. He started to play. The song was "'Cause We've Ended as Lovers." He played it slowly. At first it was fragile, like something waking from a long sleep, not yet sure the world was still there. The rusted strings roughened some notes at the edges, but underneath the rust was the wood, and the wood remembered. When the body hit resonance, the cloth draped over the counter trembled. Malcolm stopped moving. Ray stood very still with his hands at his sides. The melody climbed. The man's left hand moved up the neck and bent a note, held it, and let it cry. No pick, just the soft flesh of the fingertips pulling the strings. Every note comes from the skin, from the weight of the hand itself. There is no object between the player and the string. The sustain on that guitar, on those rusted strings, through that small amp at low volume, was something that had no right to exist. Malcolm's eyes went to the man's hands, then to his face. The cap was pushed back now. The eyes were closed. Malcolm knew the sound. He had known this sound for 40 years. From records. From the radio on the way to work. 22 years old, everything still ahead. There was a framed photograph in the far corner, dusty, nearly invisible, that told you where it came from. Only one person in the world made this sound. The final notes fell slowly, each quieter than the last. The sustain on the final note lasted longer than seemed possible, and then it thinned, and it was gone. Nobody spoke. The amp hummed. The man opened his eyes, set the guitar gently on the counter, and reached into his jacket. He placed a card on the wood under the lamp. Black card. American Express. The name in silver. Jeffrey Arnold Beck. Malcolm's hand found the edge of the counter. His eyes went to the far corner. The framed photograph. A stage shot, 1975. A man bent over a Stratocaster, mid-phrase, hair falling forward. Blow by blow. Malcolm had bought that album the week it came out. He'd been 17 years old. He looked back at the card, then at the man standing across the counter. His jaw moved. Nothing came. 28 years of reading people by their shoes, 28 years of proof of funds and client references, 28 years of knowing before they opened their mouths who was worth his time. Mr. Reed. Beck's voice was exactly what it had been all along. Quiet, unhurried. I'd like to buy this guitar. Malcolm's chin dropped. His shoulders fell. He held the counter with both hands and the tears came before he could stop them. Silent, sudden. The way things break when they've been holding too long. He walked in, Malcolm said. His voice barely made it out. He filled out the form, left the guitar. I put a price on a piece of tape and set it on the shelf. He stopped. 2 months. I never picked it up. Never asked what he'd done. Never asked anything. He took off his glasses and pressed the back of his hand to his face. Beck didn't look away. When Malcolm steadied, Beck turned to Ray. My touring crew looks after 12 instruments. They all need regular attention. He looked at the compass rose on the neck pocket. Someone who can do this, I'd like to know they're working on mine. Ray looked at the guitar in Beck's hands. Then he nodded once. Beck held the Telecaster out to Ray. His hands shook as he took it. He didn't play. He held it the way you hold something you thought you'd never see again. After a moment, he set it back on the counter. That's enough, he said quietly. Beck looked at Malcolm. What's broken doesn't get thrown away. He picked up the Telecaster by the neck. What's broken teaches. Malcolm brought 3 cups of coffee from the back. Nobody asked about milk or sugar. They sat for a while without talking, which was the right thing to do. Beck left before finishing his. At the door, he stopped. Ray called from behind him. Mr. Beck. His voice was unsteady. Happy birthday. Beck turned. How'd you know? When you were coming up, Ray said slowly, session work came with a form. Name, date of birth, instrument. A pause. Some things stay with you. Beck looked at him. Then he tipped his cap. The door opened. The bell rang once. Denmark Street carried on outside. 6 months later, the back corridor of Reed's Fine Instruments was unrecognizable. The consignment shelf was gone. A narrow workbench in its place. A lamp, a set of files, fine sandpaper in 3 grades, a small vise. A hand-lettered card above it. Finch Restorations, established 2015. The overdue loan payments cleared by spring. The mortgage refinancing went through on the 2nd application, with Beck's touring crew listed as income reference. Word spread the way word spreads when the work is real. Ray Finch's fret jobs, his neck resets, his bridge calibrations. Other musicians heard. Malcolm retired the clearance sign. Every consignment that came through the door went to the workbench before a price tag touched it. Jeff Beck died on January 10, 2023. He was 78 years old. The day the news broke, a post appeared on a small guitar restoration forum. No name attached. Just a photograph. A pale butterscotch Telecaster, restored and restrung, glowing under a workshop lamp, and a single line beneath it. He didn't ask what I'd done. He asked if I'd do it again.